Hello and welcome to the Highlight Reel, an interview series with CPG leaders who are blazing innovation across the industry. I'm Pri Carr, President and COO at Highlight, and today I'm joined by John and Alex, who are trailblazers in the industry and are going to talk to us about the innovation. So John and Alex, can you introduce yourselves to us?
So happy to be here. My name is John Herman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the new-to-world non-alcoholic brand, BERO. I have a long history in better-for-you categories and brands, including the likes of Nutrabolt and C4, where I was president for about 8 years, and then a number of years in other companies as well. But excited to be here.
Excited to have you. Alex.
Thank you for having me. I'm Alex Doman. I'm very excited to be called a CPG trailblazer for the first time. I am the current co-founder and CEO of a business called Stillers, which is yet to launch, which I don't like to say it's in stealth mode because that's not our thing, but it's not launched yet, so it's difficult to describe other than it's going to be a better-for-you soda. Launched with the celebrity Ben Stiller, which is very exciting. And I am in the process of dissolving Avec Drinks, which was my first drinks business, which I co-founded with D. Charlemagne, which was effectively like a modern American fever tree. So 90% less sugar, high quality ingredients, and American-style flavors.
That's awesome. Nice. I'm really excited to see Stiller Soda when it comes out. It does seem a little stealth because I tried to Google it and I couldn't find anything. But I'm excited to hear about it. Let's start with you, Alex. So you've been working in the non-alcoholic space with Avec, as you mentioned, and coming up with Stiller Soda. Tell me about some of the big trends that you're seeing in the space. How is the industry evolving, both in non-alcoholic beverages and in the beverage industry in general?
Sure. So my history in the space is I was a strategy consultant. This is now sort of 7 or 8 years ago, and was working with a ton of restaurants and CPG businesses about their proposition and saw some of this coming, mostly through a better for you lens. It was clear that the food system we had wasn't fit for purpose, and that included the amount of sugar in our diet, and also the amount of alcohol that we were consuming. And for a very long time, I thought, why is no one doing anything about this? And then I got kind of a bit fed up and decided I might go and do something about it. And at the time, this is now sort of 7 years ago, the UK and Europe was on a bit of a non-alc kick, and there were big brands being minted like Seedlip, who were an innovator, but it wasn't really, this is when I launched Avec, it was sort of 2020. The non-alc scene was very nascent in the US. I think Boisson, which was the big non-alc retailer that's now no longer with us, it had started in around the same time. So the UK, Europe, and Australia had sort of started this sort of non-alc trend. I came to the US, it was quite nascent, but like a lot of things that happen in America, as soon as we got onto it over here, the creation and innovation and now dominance, you would say, of the non-alc sector has been amazing. And to see it go from, when I first started pitching Avec, people said, people don't really care about sugar and people love to drink. This is 2019, right, 2020. And, we pitched that, we continued to pitch the business, of course, as we, over the next couple of years, and people didn't answer that question, ask that question in 2020, 2021, as the non-alc trend has, gone from strength to strength. So that's sort of like a big picture answer, right, which is slow to it and now probably world leader in non-alc here in the US.
Yeah, do you see, and I'd love for you, John, to weigh in as well, but do you see that trend continuing, growing? Some of the data that we collected at Highlight, you see over 50% of people having tried non-alcoholic beverages in the last 6 months. And I can say, from my experience, in my younger years, I don't think that was a thing before. So how do you see that evolving?
It's really coming down to just mainstream adoption. There have been statistics that show non-alc is 1 to 2% of the total category right now. And then there's forecasts that say it'll get to 5, 10, I've even seen as high as 20 and above % of the total category. A lot of the work and the trailblazing that had to be done when the questions were being asked of why does this deserve to exist, that hard work has been done, and now you have consumers looking for it, albeit still a major opportunity for awareness to expand. Retailers thinking about it, and bars reconsidering what should their menu look like to really service their guests at a higher level in a post-COVID world where people are going out far less. So how do you remain relevant to really the people that are visiting your establishment? So that growth is going to be fueled not by, in my opinion, a sub ecosystem of non-alc, which is a niche culture or a complementary culture to the mainstream. It will just become part of mainstream because it's going to be an expectation of consumers that whether they are fully sober, taking a day off, taking a month off, or my mission in this whole thing with BERO is to come up with a better term than zebra striping, but mixing alcohol with non-alcoholic. I think there's just this mainstream adoption that is happening and will continue to happen.
To add to that, one of the things which I was a big advocate at AVEC was that each category is different. You know, they aren't all created equal. And now John in non-alcoholic beer and other sort of non-alcoholic wines where there's a sort of one-for-one comparison, right? You know, non-alcoholic wine, non-alcoholic beer is a very defined category with a market which, as you say, is going to continue to grow. Outside of those, you know, when you get into functional non-alcoholic beverages, or in AVEC's case, a sort of adult soft drink that you could mix with alcohol or mix with a non-alcoholic spirit or have by itself, a lot more blending is going on, right? So when I started in the category, AVEC was considered very explicitly non-alc by retailers, most importantly, right? And as the years have gone by, it's not become, the amount of innovation that's going on, whether it's people like Hot Water who really blend the lines, right? Or functional beverages who are looking to, you know, like Recess or whomever. The difference between like it being explicitly non-alc and having, you know, just this blend to drinking non-alcoholic drinks which aren't necessarily quote unquote non-alc, right? And that, you know, extends to functional beverages and non-alc and adult soft drinks. And actually, a lot of innovation is going on there.
Right. And I think the data is pretty clear here. And John, you have a lot of industry experience in the health and wellness thing, but the better for you trend. So we're doing it for your health, for our well-being overall. How do you see that trend influencing the beverage industry in general and the adoption of it? And it's top of mind for me right now with the Surgeon General's warning on alcohol and cancer risk. But there's a lot of talk in my friend group about what is actually better for you. How do we create a healthier, more balanced lifestyle overall? So how do you see it changing?
Yeah, taking a step back from non-alcoholic beverages like BERO or AVEC, all of these like categories that are massive, sodas, energy drinks, beer, wine, they're just being redefined for the next generation. So better for you, while it's a good catchphrase and term, ultimately it comes down to people are becoming more educated about what they're putting in their body and they're discerning what they don't want to have. But ultimately everybody still wants to indulge, but the legacy brands aren't checking the box for the next generation of consumers. So when Poppy and Olipop started really building this probiotic, prebiotic soda category, it wasn't about gut health. It was really about the evolution of soda. And you've seen that translate to Poppy taking a different stance on, I think it's the future of soda is here, or whatever their term that I might be butchering. The same thing happened in my past with energy drinks. Red Bull and Monster and Rockstar, they were untouchable until better flavor, zero sugar, functional ingredients enter the category. And now this idea of performance energy, which was all grounded in better for you, is 30% of a massive TAM. And that was driven by brands like C4 in my past, or Celsius, or many others. That same thing is happening here. So I think it's just a more educated consumer making better decisions about what they're putting in their body because they're worried about how they feel tomorrow, and they're worried about how they feel 10, 20 years from now. And it's just making the legacy brands have to either evolve or die.
Right. Now, Alex, as you're thinking about Stiller soda, which angle are you thinking of leaning in? This is a non-alcoholic beverage or a better-for-you beverage?
This is to my previous point, right, which is I strongly believe that if you take a step back and you put yourself in the consumer's shoes and not the retailer or the beverage entrepreneur's shoes, people don't discern really between, you know, non-alc or better for you or whatever. They just go, I want a drink.
Right.
And this point is made so clear to me because consumers really don't know the difference between a seltzer and a soda and or whatever. Someone I kind of pitched the idea yesterday for Stillers, and he went, "Oh, I love seltzer. I love Spindrift." And for us as people in the category, those are totally different categories. That's a near water drink. That's not even in our category. It's not even close, right? But that's not the point. The consumers,
Don't distinguish.
don't distinguish, and so you have to be thinking about the whole share of mouth, not just your category. And so for Stillers, we're going to play into what John just talked about, right? Which is the legacy brands have got classic innovators' dilemma, which is to say they're kind of backed into this false dichotomy of full sugar, so in Coca-Cola's case, 36 grams of sugar, which is, depending on which country you're in, either more than your entire daily sugar intake or around about what you should have in one can, right? Or 0.0, but they get to it artificially. So whether it's Coke Zero or Diet Coke, there's this whole thing last year about aspartame. Does it cause cancer? Yes or no? You don't really want to have that, hanging over your product. And then Coke Zero is artificial. And so we're going to be doing something that's taking a leaf out of the Olipop and Poppy playbook, which is all natural, low calorie, low sugar, but delicious soda.
How do you keep up with the innovation in the space as well? So there are other entrants in this space, and as you think of BERO, you think of Stillers, AFEC. If you think of it, how do you distinguish yourself from the competition in the field? Not just the legacy players, but the other innovative disruptors that are in there. What makes you different?
I think intuition can't be undervalued. Like having a good gut and being able to look at a category and understand the consumer, but then approaching it with, no ego to understand that you may not know everything. So you want to rely on research as well. But it's just fascinating. If you think about like the innovative retailers where you go out and we are consumers. So we're constantly learning about, naturally what could be a great option for me. But being able to walk a shelf and say, okay, I understand the positioning here because you have a brand background potentially, but this is the audience not being spoken to. And, really just, you're going to be wrong a lot. And that's where I think research comes in. But just intuition and gut and being passionate about what you do. Like, it excites me to create brands and create products. And, you don't have to bat 1,000. You bat 300, you're in the Hall of Fame in Major League Baseball. I think it's probably the same in CPG. But like being able to read those occasions and also think about your own occasions. I think taking a step back to the non-alc better for you discussion, there are really three things at play. I think one, there's a reality that the only non-alc option for so long was club soda and a lime. And that's fine, but you get tired of just having club soda and a lime. The second big piece is the culture of, are you allowed to drink a non-alcoholic beverage in an alcohol setting? And the culture is evolving. It's not that judgment of like, sure, you'll still have it, but like you're not going to get the peer pressure of, come on, grab a real drink, grab something else, because there are becoming better options than just a club soda and a lime. And the third, there's still very much a ritual of drink. And it's just the evolution of what that looks like. We were doing a brand launch and kickoff at Art Basel in Miami. And probably the drink I saw the most there was one of those functional sodas. And like the idea is, I want to be out, I want to have a good time, I want to have something that tastes really good, but I don't want to miss out on the social interaction. But the confluence of those three things that like, even if you're not a brand innovator, I think a lot of people could probably identify with how do you drive the change there. Right. And that's where the intuition, I think, comes in.
Alex, as you're thinking about Stiller Soda coming in to the market, how are you thinking about differentiating yourself from the other sodas that might exist, or even in a customer's mind who thinks seltzer is the same as soda because it's just another drink?
I'm trying to think of how much I should give away, but
not too much.
I think there's always, I find innovators in the space fall into one of two camps. Do you listen to the data and take a data-driven approach, or do you take an intuition level approach? And I think that both can work. I think that they don't, the truth is that I think the best people know that you have to do both. You know, you should be making decisions made on taste and intuition with all the data that you can get, right? Because data's never perfect. You know, we do we do all these surveys too, like Highlight do, and you're only getting a snapshot of information, and you don't want to just like take it for what it is.
Right.
You know, you kind of need to interpret it amongst all the other data, with all the other data points, and kind of get a North Star for your business. Now, with Stillers in particular, because that was the question, is how are we thinking about differentiating ourselves, is we personally think that the mainstream drinker has been left behind by a lot of the innovation. A lot of the innovation has been, because it's really quite early. I mean, it's difficult to describe how fast real habits are changing in the US specifically. I mean, they're changing globally, but from a non-out perspective, it is frightening how fast the changes in terms of habits. I mean, the non-alc shelf didn't exist in most retailers 2.5 years ago, seriously, and it's now in every major grocery store. And when we went on the store with Avec drinks, it was amazing to see that we were competing with very established brands on the shelf straight off the bat, because such was the demand. Right, so that's to say, things are changing really quickly. It's difficult to make decisions, but we at Stillers think that a lot of the innovations happen for the coasts, and that's necessarily so, right? Because these people are the people who are often changing their habits the fastest, and we think there's a chance for a bit of, this is a geeky term, but second mover's advantage.
Yeah.
In going, hey, this is mass changes happening, where all these changes and habits are being thrown up in the air. How are they falling? Where do we, a bit of reading of the tea leaves, where do we think they're going to fall? And picking a new proposition that we think is more applicable to a larger audience.
Yeah. I work at Highlight, so I clearly believe in the power of data, but I do think the combination of intuition and data to guide where to direct that intuition, because you may it may pull you in multiple directions at one time, which has been my experience in work, that there are two paths that sound pretty good for us to go after. Can be really, really powerful. Thinking back a little farther behind in your careers, for our listeners who are thinking of launching their own products or renovating their products that are out in the market, any lessons to share about what you wish you'd done differently in past beverage launches, things that you might want to change around? And Alex, I'll start with you because you're dissolving a business right
Yes, lots of learnings. I wrote myself a list of why I shouldn't set up another beverage brand as I was dissolving Avec, and it basically comes down to one key point with 4 sub-bullets, which is don't start a beverage brand if you don't have unfair advantages at the get-go. If you do so, you can still win, but it's going to take you a long time.
Yeah.
So if you want to have one of these exits that everyone hopes for, you have to start up with one of 4 advantages, right? I call it my loading the bases theory, so I can feel like I can relate to Americans a bit better. And it's unfair advantages in access to customers, distribution, lower cost, and access to capital. And if you look at the story of beverage, most of the big success stories have had at least 2 of those 4 things out the get-go. And that was a big learning for me with Avec, because we kind of did everything that you were supposed to do, right? We turned up for our seed round with all of the best-in-class KPIs that we were told that we would need, and then there was sort of a great liquidity crisis going on in an early-stage consumer, but at the time, that was a big learning, right? Which is don't go out. We're using baseball analogies. It's so fun. Don't go out swinging. Load the bases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I think for me, I'm pretty optimistic in life. But optimism can be a really dangerous thing when you're starting a business, because you'll be blinded because, of course, your baby is the prettiest baby and everything's perfect. And I think having too much optimism probably prevents you from seeing what's around the corner and seeing where you're failing. And that could be failing in positioning, capabilities, allocation of funds. But trying to tone down optimism, I think, is a big learning for me. And then secondarily, I think focus is a very important word. I think focus is something I absolutely struggle with. You go into planning seasons and you think, here are the 3 things we need to get done, and quickly the 3 become 6, and you realize that you've lost focus. Or even when you think you have focus, it's easy to take on more than you can really be successful with. So I'm a recovering, probably overly less focused person. But I think my team keeps me in check, and I can't agree enough that like the check boxes of product market fit, operational capabilities, and actually funding to do so. Those 3 things, like you can't really be successful if you don't check 2 of the 3 of those boxes.
Really strong foundations. Is that's been my experience running businesses. Is I've actually run maybe the same business, started and shut it down multiple times in my career, and sometimes the timing just wasn't right. And it was these fundamentals of like, is the market willing to put money behind something at this point, even though the foundation is right? And then sometimes it was just execution. I was like, sounded like a great idea that we should go pursue it, and didn't turn out to be the best idea at that time.
And what are you wired to do? I think, BERO, we're creating a premium non-alcoholic beer brand. We're not doing the hard work that some other brands did for the past 8 years, creating the category, convincing people it mattered, getting the contract brewing capabilities up and running. We're coming into a very hot category, and we're saying, hey, we don't want to make non-alcoholic beer. We want to make a great beer that happens to be non-alcoholic. It's a completely different skill set. So also know what you're signing up for, because building a category from nothing is a lot harder than building something that is starting to get momentum.
Yeah. I'm going to piggyback on that point. One of our research findings on why people are choosing non-alc beverages is the primary reason people choose it is actually for the taste. They want something not just that's better for you, but something that's delightful on taste. So how do you actually, taste seems like something that's so intuition driven, so personal, but how do you think about, we're actually going to nail that spot of like create a great tasting beverage?
So when we were starting BERO, it was, Tom Holland is my partner and co-founder. He has an amazing and authentic story about his sobriety and why he was looking for the brand. I had operational background and capability. I like beer, he likes beer. We didn't know the first thing of making beer. So the first hire we had was a tremendous brewmaster. 40 years experience, worked for Sam Adams, started up his own brewery. So the first was we added the talent to really make sure that we could over-deliver on the expectation, because again, it wasn't, oh, that's a good non-alc beer. Like, I want to be able to do a Pepsi challenge one day and have BERO up against, your mainstream beers and have people say like, oh, that's the best tasting beer there is. So it was making sure we had the talent and the expertise on the team.
This is something that I have been. I mean, I was a strategy consultant in my previous life, and did a lot of this sort of surveying work, and have brought that into my my current world. And the word taste, and we've started adding refreshing as well, because it comes up a lot in soda, is such an interesting one to me. And my worry about it is, because that's basically one of our key insights, is really the thing that people care about most is taste. Mm-hmm. Let's make the tastiest product we can. And so that's how we're measuring everything, right? Which is, do we, in a taste test, blind taste test with XYZ competitor, who wins? And we're not going to launch until we think we have the winning product, right? Which is a really good metric to have, and it really focuses the business, which is fantastic. Because a lot of our conversations have been the value of data and all this. I think one of the interesting things is, do people mean that? Like, what do they mean when they say taste is the most important thing? Or is that is like a truism? And so that's something I wrestle with a lot, is when you're asked about something which you're tasting, what's the most important thing? The taste. You're like, okay, that's interesting. Is it, and if you look at, there are lots of products on the market who are hugely successful and I think would fail the taste test badly. I won't name any names, but it isn't necessarily always the best tasting product. So I think it's an interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. We're Highlight. We do research and a lot on the sensory side of research. And there are ways to ask questions that are more nuanced that are less likely to lead to truism. But it's interesting, it's almost always a combination of factors. So people will say taste is key. I'll say from my personal experience, if I'm spending calories on something, I want it to be worth those calories. I'm a wine drinker, and when I moderate my wine consumption, it is for a wine for me is a lot about the social experience, the taste experience, the stories behind all of those. But it's all of those things that come together. It's really hard to study on a single dimension, but it's why at Highlight we believe is like you need to keep innovating, renovating what you've built, and keep extracting insight from who your target customer is on how they're evolving in their journey. And it's especially hard and more needing of data when the customer preferences are also evolving as rapidly as they are in this category.
And I'll say that the interesting thing about the taste metric is that to an extent we view it as an as an objective thing. But the truth is that the same wine, you could put the same wine in an expensive looking bottle next to the same wine, and people would say that the one that would look more expensive tasted better.
Yep.
So it's taste is actually not just funnily enough isn't just about the objective taste on your tongue. It's a component, right? It's like
it's very rarely just about an objective taste, right?
But that's an interesting thing for an innovator, right? Is like, okay, well, so that isn't an objective metric. How do we define taste? It's we found this a lot with Avec is how your can looks, feels, contributes massively to taste. And that's difficult to innovate for.
Yeah, it's been one of our top things to study is packaging.
Yeah.
And the package experience, a blinded experience versus a packaged experience of what does that lead to in the sensory experience of something. And it's fascinating to see that it is, I think the easiest way to describe it is it's all a multi-sensory experience that gives you taste and feeling and affinity and liking of a product. So that's super fun.
I mentioned intuition. We did a ton of research on BERO, whether it be a myriad of packaging opportunities, namings, and then of course I think we had 100 to 200 people taste test our beer compared to others leading within the space. And there were a few that did really well. There was this one actually, our hazy IPA. We're watching on video, and the early rounds we were getting ripped apart, and that hurt me. Now, mind you, again, my brewmaster, who's amazing, he's watching it, and he took that as an opportunity to rethink and do better, and we tweaked it to something better. But I think it goes back to if you think you have the individual components. When they put together, do they tell your brand story? Great. But then when you kind of break them apart too, can they stand on their own? It's not an exact science, but we definitely learned a lot during those taste tests about the opportunity.
Yeah. We find it critical to get the authentic information, right? Like in the context that you're making those decisions. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the better for you category and how that's evolving. So the better for you term, at least in my life, has meant many, many different things. There's a new fad that comes out of what it means for something to be better for you. So as you think about it, what does better for you mean for BERO? What does it mean for Stiller Soda? And how do you think that definition is going to evolve over time?
So for me, better for you can be, you mentioned the word fad or trend. And hopefully, and you don't know until you know, you're hitching your wagon to, do you hitch your horse or do you hitch a wagon?
I think you hitch your wagon to a horse.
Okay, well, hitching the wagon to the trend horse and not the fad horse. You look at better for you trends like keto a few years ago. I'm not sure, people are still doing keto diets, but it's not the rage that it once was. So, to identify the trends to connect to, it to me, it goes down to just what is the addressable market that you're getting into. My hope is that we're not creating a brand that's niche and small. We're able to create something with scale that can really make an impact to a lot of people's lives. And I think that comes across in how we're seeing retailers really react to the brand and react to the positioning. And I'm by no means disillusioned to think it's because I'm in the room talking to them. Tom and his story and his involvement with the brand, it comes through so well. And what that's really resulted in is some amazing strategic partnerships. So, the moment we presented this brand to Sprouts, they wanted to be the first retailer to carry it, and they rushed to make it happen. Then we were having conversations with Target, which has been absolutely a dream come true, with end caps across 1,400 stores and all of the support and integration from top to bottom. That's resulted in us being the #1 NA beer brand and the #9 beer brand holistically in their set in the first 2 weeks of being out there. To working with a retailer like Amazon, who literally realized they weren't in the NA space, and had to rewrite regulatory code to allow us to ship and have age gating and like work on their platform. Those proof points with these like giant influential retailers, it really told me that there was this trend where better for you meets a really meaningful category that is alcohol or beer, and retailers are seeing that they need to get behind it because that's the evolution. So it's been a real, I think it's been a pleasure to see that confirmation that, again, it's not just me falling in love with what we're building. It's like other people can see the potential there too.
Right.
And yeah, I think it gives me a lot of hope that like this instance of better for you can be a trend and something that we'll continue to build.
A real persistent one.
For me, I think we're coming to this point where we might be achieving that awful word balance. It's sort of something that I think we've been teetering on the edge of for a long time. We have all these diets come out, and there's this and there's that. And I think I'm an optimist, which you have to be kind of as an entrepreneur, right? And I think transparency of information, is improving. Asymmetries of information, in decline. And I think that whether it's, how people are drinking or what people are, and it's non-alc, alc, and you said zebra striping, but I think people are really folding in non-alcoholic options into their everyday, and people will get to choose both when they're at home and out. And I think the same is true in food and sort of the soda world, which is I think people are going to start to look away from full sugar, 36 gram of sugar options and 0.0 and question like how do we get there, and go for something which tastes great, is all natural, is naturally low in sugar and calorie.
Right.
That's where I think we're headed.
I think the key word on balance is a really powerful one, and our data also showed that. It's actually, you won't find a bunch of people who are on extreme ends on the data of like, I'm a never drinker, I will never ever touch alcohol, to I'm a binge drinker, or I drink every single night. But you see a lot in the middle of people trying to figure out what is that moderated balance, what is that balance that is healthy for me, and that's also more sustainable, so it becomes less of a fad and more of a trend.
Absolutely.
All right, we're out of time, so I'm going to ask the last question. Both of you have in common that you work with a pretty famous co-founder in developing your product. What's that like?
Do you want to take this first?
As I said, we haven't launched our product yet, so we're really in the beginning stages. But honestly, it's been a delight so far. I mean, creating a brand with someone who spends their life creating things is a joy. And I'm not crazy enough to think that, like any business, we will go through our ups and our downs and things will change. But so far, so good.
Awesome.
When I left Nutrabolt, it's a privileged thing to say, but I'll say it. I had two goals. It was work with great people and have fun doing what I was doing. And from the moment that I met Tom, it's been honestly a delight. Like, good human being with an unbelievable perspective of the opportunity and who his own personal brand is, and that passion to build something without ego. We rely on each other so much that we've built trust. And ultimately, I think the first meeting I had, I told him, I'm like, every new brand shows a chart up and to the right, and look how smart we are and how good we are. But when you zoom in, it's a really jagged line. And I go, we have to really kind of batten down and realize like there's going to be downturns as much as upturns, and we have to pull each other through it. And it's been great, honestly. And I think the learning for me is trying to understand, when people see the opportunity with the brand, is it an opportunity that they believe in with the brand, or is it that they just want their share of the celebrity's time, and balancing the two to make sure that we're maximizing the potential for both, our long-term growth, but then also, our consumers.
Right.
But he's been an amazing partner.
That's awesome. I love to hear from both of you on the authenticity of both of your brands and what you're building, that they are honest stories that, yes, the celebrity lends the brand as well, but it's a holistic, authentic story. That was really fun. Thank you for joining us, John and Alex. This was a really fun session. We'll share more about how to stay connected with Highlight and our speakers in a post-event email. Stick around for live Q&A, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All right.